Okay, all right. Shabbat Shalom. We are back. We are going to be continuing on with the triennial Torah portion. This week, we are going to be dealing with, let's see here, Exodus 11, chapter 11 and 12. 11 and 12. This week, we will be dealing with the last and final plague. And so when we look at this last plague, we learn a lot of things about Passover, because of course, we see in the last plague the Passover situation. So when we look at the Torah, look at the Torah in general, specifically when we deal with going through Bereshit, Genesis, it's primarily a historical account. You look at this account of what happened to a particular group of people. Bereshit is basically that's what you have. Exodus, Shemot, which we are in right now, you have the same situation where you're dealing with a historical account of what happened, but also what we have is the giving of the commands to the people. The Most High is, we see him giving his commandments to his people Israel. And so not only do we have this historical account, but we have, like I said, this imparting of the character, the laws, statutes, and commands of the Most High to his people. And so, we'll see some of the initial, commands that he actually gives the people as a whole, and also see how that relates to us in terms of, where we fit into the situation even now. So we want to go ahead and get into this. We'll begin by reading. Let's see, we'll probably read. Let's read down to, let's see, verse 13. Let's pull up. I'll pull up the scriptures here, and we'll read down to verse 13. Exodus 11. Hold on. Wait a second. Don't go to 13. Let's read to Oh, it just goes to 10. All right, let's just read the whole chapter. There's only 10 verses there.
All right. Exodus 11:1. And Yahweh said to Moshe, I am bringing yet one more plague on Pharaoh and on Mitzrayim, After that, he is going to let you go from here. When he lets you go, he shall drive you out from here altogether. Speak now in the hearing of the people, and let every man ask from his neighbor, and every woman from her neighbor, objects of silver and objects of gold. And Yahweh gave the people favor in the eyes of the Mitzrites. And the man Moshe was very great in the land of Mizraim, in the eyes of Pharaoh's servants, and in the eyes of the people. And Moshe said, Thus said Yahweh, about midnight I am going out into the midst of Mizraim, and all the firstborn in the land of Mizraim shall die. From the firstborn of Pharaoh who sits on his throne, even to the firstborn of the female servant who is behind the handmill, and all the firstborn of cattle. And there shall be a great cry throughout all the land of Mitzrayim, such as has never been or ever shall be again. But against any of the children of Israel, no dog shall move its tongue against man or against beast, so that you know that Yahweh makes distinction between Mitzrayim and Israel. And all these servants of yours shall come out down, some shall come down to me and bow down to me, saying, Get out, you and all your people at your feet. And after that I shall go out. And he went out from Pharaoh in great displeasure. But Yahweh said to Moshe, Pharaoh is not going to listen to you, in order to multiply my wonders in the land of Mitzrayim. And Moshe and Aaron did all these wonders before Pharaoh. However, Yahweh strengthened the heart of Pharaoh, and he did not let the children of Israel go out of his land.
Okay, very good. So we see over here a couple things we want to look at. When we look at, let's see, if we go back to verse number 1 over here, where it says, when he lets you go, he shall drive you out from here altogether. He shall drive you out from here altogether. We want to, let's say, pull up our tools. We want to look at something here in the first verse. Let's see here. He will bring you play afterwards, thrust you out. If you notice, even just from looking at this in the Strongs, you see the English version, he says, he shall surely thrust you out. And if we see these numbers here, we can see that these are the same number. And so the English, sometimes you'll say surely, thus, or verily, or something like this, or but in the Hebrew, a lot of times we have this doubling factor that's giving you the emphasis, where it's giving you this thing that's it intensifies the situation over here. So actually, when you look at this in the Hebrew, it's giving you this kind of in two different forms of the same word, again, for this emphasis. But the word is to drive out from a possession, especially to expatriate or divorce. This is interesting here. Cast up or out, divorced woman, to drive away, to thrust out. Okay, so when we look at this word over here that's translated as to thrust out, right? It's giving you this idea of a divorce. Hiskey, hand me the whiteboard. We want to look at this in the ancient real quick, and give me that little dry eraser. It's interesting when we look at this word here. Let me pull this up here. We look at this in the ancient Hebrew, that word garash. Here, let me see this one more time here. We have let me write this down. We have a gimel. We have a resh. And we have a sheen. And then so in the ancient, you have this thing here. You have the man's head. And you have these teeth. Okay, good. So if we looked at this here, let's see. We can see that you have the modern on top. Yeah, then you do that. You have the modern on top. Oh, wait. Hold on a second here. You have the modern Hebrew there on top. And you have the ancient on the bottom. So the gimel is this. It's kind of like the leg, this man's leg. You have the idea of walking, right? So you have this idea of walking, movement, right, with this here. And then you have this man's head, which, you know, is the man there. And then you have the sheen, which can mean many things. You have the two front teeth. But when you have the two front teeth, you kind of use that two front teeth to bite with. So if you want to sever some meat from the bone or what have you, you would use these biting teeth, right? So you have this walking or movement of the man into this thing that severs, right? And so when we think about the idea of this garage, it's a severing of the relationship between two entities, right? It's going from being part of and connected to Pharaoh, going from that point of connection and you know, their connectedness that they have to being that thing being severed, you know, literally biting, just as if you was to bite some flesh and tear it from the bone. It's interesting when we look here in the definition, we see the idea of divorce, where if you have a divorce, you have a relationship, a marriage that is severed. The ties are broken. There's no more connection between the two parties. There is a finality to the separation. And so when we see this idea of driving out, It's not the kind of thing like what we saw with how what um, Pharaoh was trying to get the people to do, just go out a little ways and stay a little while and come back. Right? You go and leave your little ones behind. You know, Pharaoh was trying to have it be this kind of a thing that wasn't an everlasting thing, where we see what the Most High is calling for is this end, a severing of the relationship. You shall surely, this version that I have, when he lets you go, he will surely drive you out from here completely. Right. And so it's interesting that we see that emphasis that's given with this idea of being driven out from Egypt, right? And so we see also an interesting thing that we see over here. Let's see. Verse 2. Look at verse 2. Verse 2, where it says, "Speak now in the hearing of the people," where it says, let every man ask from his neighbor, and let every woman from her neighbor. When we look at this in the King James here, the King James here, they just get it wrong. I'm just gonna say they get it wrong, right? When they say, "Let every man borrow of his neighbor." There's no borrowing that's being done, because again, when we look at the idea of what's going on with Israel, where we're talking about the idea of them being driven out of here altogether. If they borrowed, they'd have to come back and then bring the things back, right? And so the idea of borrowing is something that the translators they missed the mark on that one, right? Because the idea, there is no idea of borrowing happening here. When we look at that word, which is sha'al, even if we was to look at this and think about, the ancient over here, where we have this sheen again, where we have this idea of this biting again, right? And again, we think about that biting, we have the idea of severing, right? But so the giving would be kind of just, it wouldn't be this reciprocated thing. Like, it's not a borrow, right? You're going to give me the things and then I'm going to go with those. You're making, so to ask is something that is good. To beg or demand, I guess, is an idea. But again, we think about the idea of borrowing, that's just, it lacks in the situation. But I wanted to go back and see, because there's some interesting things that we can see. And again, when we think about the idea of borrowing, I think conceptually the idea of borrowing is wrong, because of the idea of giving something back. But the thing that I would say is, we could look at and say is correct about this idea of borrowing. If I ask to borrow something as opposed to just asking you to give me something, I'm more apt to give you the thing if I know that I'm just giving it to you temporarily. And so we don't focus on the idea of the return, but more so on the idea of my readiness to give it to you. Then I think that, we could think about this idea of borrowing from that perspective. Again, with the idea of my readiness to to give it to you. Let's look over here. I want to look at. Um, I want to go back because if we go back, we see this is something that the Most High actually declared from the beginning. From the beginning, when they first even just started talking about this. Look at read verse 22 right there. What's that say?
But every woman shall ask from her neighbor and from the stranger in her house objects of silver and objects of gold and garments, and you shall put them on your sons and on your daughters, and shall plunder the Mitzrayim.
Okay, so when we look at it, even there, when we see it in the context of that verse, when we think about the idea of, first of all, we're dismissing the idea of borrowing because now we've added the idea of plundering, right? So you have, if you're plundering, well, let's see what they use. What's the word that we see over here? Oh, because even look, when we look at this verse here, the translators translate this here as borrow again. Let's see here. Spoil. Let's see that there, not saw, to snatch away, right? If I'm snatching something away from you, there's a little bit of kind of yeah, it's slightly aggressive. Like if I want to give you something and then you snatch it away, it kind of it might cause me to feel a certain kind of way, unless I know that there's really nothing that I could do about the fact that you stashed it away from me, right? But I'm just saying, when we look at this verse over here, there's an added component of this plundering that the Most High said that he was going to cause to happen, right? And so when we think about the idea, again, looking at this text comparatively speaking, when we think about what's going on with it, the idea of borrowing really is not present in the text. But again, I think that what we get from it is the readiness of the people to give all that they have to the Israelites, which, like I said, is something that could be connected to borrowing, right? Because again, I'm readily able to give you something in the context of borrowing.
I wonder if the Israelites looked at it. I mean, the Egyptians looked at it like an offering to the God of Israel. That just kind of showed off a little bit,
Perhaps you could look at it in that way. And even still, if you was to think about it in that way, you still have this willingness to give. If you think about it, the idea of, well, I don't think much of these people, but I know that their Elohim is serious because I've seen all of these things. So they can ask me and I'm going to give it to them readily because I know that their Elohim is pretty powerful. So I think that the emphasis that we need to deal with is the readiness of the people to give, without any fight.
Because some people they they don't like Israel. They try to say that we stole from the Egyptians, and we said we was going to take it and give it back.
Yeah.
And then we never gave it back.
Right. And again, that that is going to come from this idea where borrowing is just a mistranslation. There's no borrowing involved here, right? Is they're asking, they're inquiring of the goods of Egypt. Give me your things, right? It's not about can I have your things and then I'll bring your things back later. It's about let me have your things, and the people are giving them. Over here in Exodus chapter 3, it's interesting that again we talk about the readiness of the giver and the when we look at what it says every woman shall ask from her neighbor and from the stranger in her house the objects of silver and the objects of gold and garments. So the women, he's saying the women will go and get the stuff. The women will go and get the stuff. She is not the warrior, right? She's not a soldier. She is not the hostile one. If there's going to be hostility, she's not going to be the one to execute this, the hostileness, right? But in this case, hostility is not necessary, right? In this case, a soldier or a warrior is not necessary to execute the demands because the thing is being readily given. And so I think that is also shows us the idea of the property being readily given because you're taking the weaker vessel and she's the one that's going to get the stuff, right? Not the man. The man's not going. He's not nobody's being bullied over here, right? She's going over with her softness and she's saying, just give me your gold and your silver and your garments, right? She's probably saying it in a nice way too, with a little smirk on her face, a little bit, right? Because it's not an aggressive thing from humans. The Most High is the one who's the aggressor here, and then the people are just reaping the benefits, right? So it's not necessary for the man to send his muscle over to the people, right? He just the women, you go over there and do this. You go over there and say to give me the stuff, right? And so it's important to see. We can see with how the Most High even says that this thing is going to go down, that the Most High is the one who's strong arming the people. It's not Israel that's doing it, right? He's the force behind the situation, so much so that the man don't even have to get involved in the situation because it's not a fight, right? It's not a fight. Well, maybe it is a fight, but the Most High is the one that's doing the slapping, right? Okay. Let's see here. Let me go down. Let me pull this back up here.
It's just really interesting that the men didn't together and get this stuff.
Yeah. Well, just the contrast over here. It don't mention the men over here, right? It does in the other verse where we're at, but the original time where he speaks it, he says,
The women are gonna be the ones.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, so all right, if we go down, let's see here. We see that dealing with this last plague, we see it is about the firstborn of Egypt will die, right? Whether it is humans, whether it's man, or whether it's beasts, right? The firstborn in the land shall die, he says. Let's see. I wanted to look at, read again verses 6 and 7 over here.
And there shall be a great cry throughout all the land of Mizraim, such as has never been or ever shall be again. But against any of the children of Israel, no dog shall move its tongue against man or against beast, so that you know that Yahweh makes distinction between Mizraim and Israel.
Okay, we talked about this before, this idea of this distinction being made between Israel and Egypt. And we see there this being brought up again. This particular distinction that is being spoken of here, about the cries going out, right? This great cry that's going out against the Egyptians, where it uses this little idiomatic saying over here where it talks about the idea that no dog shall move its tongue. Let's see, some verses say it other ways. Let's see here. But against any of the sons of Israel, a dog will not even bark. So when we look at that, first of all, we see the distinction that's being made here is that the outcry of pain and sorrow is the thing that's being talked about here in terms of, the difference. There's going to be great sorrow and pain and crying in Egypt because of the fact of the loss of this firstborn. This idiom that's being used over here is people don't actually know exactly what it is that they're trying to get across. There's many people that have their thoughts on it in terms of, maybe the dog, dogs get close with their family members and, even, can feel sadness and sorrow at the death of family members. So the adding of the dog, which these people really they had dogs as part of their culture. These people did, and in terms of having them, they had kind of this reverence for them also in terms of gods. And so you could look at this in terms of being a literal thing where it's dealing with the idea of their dogs. Even their dogs were sorrowful because of the fact that this thing was going on. Or you could think about the fact that the God of Israel was exacting his judgment and wrath on the people, but their deity, that the dog-headed man deity, didn't have nothing to say in response to what was happening.
I like that one.
the Mosai did his thing in Mitzrayim and caused all the people to cry over there. But the children of Israel, where they was at, right? There was nothing that happened to them that caused them to cry out in response to anything, because they were made to be separate, right? There was a distinction that was made between the people of the Most High and Mizraim that caused this distinction caused there to be great sorrow in Egypt and no sorrow where Israel was. So it talks about the effects of the distinction at the end of chapter 11. These are the effects of the distinction. We know that the Most High made a distinction, but these are really the effects of the distinction. The distinction that was made, the thing that facilitated the distinction, we learn about in the next chapter, which we'll read down to the 13th verse. So let's pull up the next chapter and see. We see over here the result of the distinction that is made, but we want to look at what it is that that marked the distinction, and we see that in the next chapter. We're going to read verse 1 down through 13. Let me pull that up real quick here. Let's see. Okay, go ahead and start at verse 1 down to 13.
And Yahweh spoke to Moshe and to Aaron in the land of Mitzrayim, saying, "This new moon is the beginning of new moons for you. It is the first new moon of the year for you. Speak to all the congregation of Israel, saying, on the 10th day of this new moon, each one of them is to take for himself a lamb according to the house of his father, a lamb for a household. And if the household is too small for the lamb, let him and his neighbor next to his house take it according to the number of the beings, according to each man's need. So you make your count for the lamb. Let the lamb be a perfect one, a year-old male. Take it from the sheep or from the goats, and you shall keep it until the 14th day of the same new moon. Then all the assembly of the congregation of Israel shall slay it between the evenings. And they shall take some of the blood and put it on the 2 doorposts and on the lintel of the houses where they eat it. And they shall eat the flesh on that night, roasted in fire with unleavened bread and with bitter herbs they shall eat it. Do not eat it raw nor boiled at all with water, but roasted in fire, its head with its legs and its inward parts. And you do not leave of it until morning, and what remains of it until morning you are to burn with fire. And this is how you eat it: your loins girded, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand. And you shall eat it in haste. It is the Pesach of Yahweh. And I shall pass through the land of Mitzrayim on that night, and shall strike all the firstborn in the land of Mitzrayim, both man and beast. And on all the mighty ones of Mitzrayim I shall execute judgment. I am Yahweh. And the blood shall be a sign for you on the houses where you are. And when I see the blood, I shall pass over you, and I let the plague not come on you to destroy you when I strike the land of Mitzrayim."
Okay, very good. So when we get down over here to the next chapter in verse 13, we see what it is that identifies, that signifies the distinction, right? It's the blood of the lamb on the houses of the people, because the blood of the lamb was put on the doorposts and the lintels of the people of Israel. Because that was done, the death angel is able to pass over their houses and go to the people's houses who don't have the blood of the lamb on the doorposts and the lintel and kill those ones firstborn. Right? And so we see the Most High said, he said that there was a distinction. There was a distinction in terms of he chose this people. But not only was there kind of this spiritual distinction that the Most High declared, but there also was this physical distinction that is able to be seen with eyes. Right? Right. Right. Physical eyes. Right. So you have a physical representation of this spiritual separation. That was some bars right there. Right. And so when we look at this, we see this thing that makes the distinction, the lamb, the blood on the doorposts and on the lintels, right? And so it's interesting that we see not only did the Most High choose a particular people, but then besides his choosing, there was this other thing that was necessary for them to do in order to be sure that they missed out on this plague, which was the lamb and the blood and the doorposts and the lintels.
Before that, all they had to do was just be who they was.
Before that, there was nothing for them to do but just exist. All they had to do was nothing. Just because of the simple fact that they was Israel, they was good. They was safe. Just based on the simple fact of who their daddy was. They was able to be exempt from plagues 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Right? They was able to get out of 6 plagues just by a simple fact of being Israel. But this last plague, there is a command that's given. There's instructions that are given, and it says the blood shall be a sign for you in your house where you are. When I see the blood, I'll pass over you. Now we can assume, since there's no crying out and no dogs barking over there, that they actually did the thing that was necessary for them to do to get the death angel to pass over their homes. Nonetheless, I think the key that we want to deal with here is the fact that this wasn't just some automatic thing that just from a simple fact of them being Israel didn't save them from anything. The thing that saved them from something was this blood, was there this obedience to the Most High and his instructions as related to this Passover lamb. And so when we think about this, from our perspective, this is something that is very important, because the thing that's at the that must be at the forefront is, of course, whatever it is that keeps us alive. Whatever it is that causes us to be able to escape death. What is that thing? If we relay, if we look back for understanding to the situation with the last plague and the Passover situation, the thing that separated us, the thing that made us, that distinguished us from Mizraim was the fact that we obediently put the blood on our doorposts. And so when we think about this from a perspective of where we are today, the only place that knowing that you are Israel gets you to is helping you to understand that you need to put blood on your doorposts.
You have an insider knowledge.
Yeah.
You know what?
You need to put the blood on your doorposts because of the fact that you're Israel.
And some people might not even know. You know?
No, what?
They might not even know what was coming. Like people don't know judgment's coming. They just live in their life.
Yeah, they just living. They know some strange things have been going on. They know that. I mean, you look out and you see over there, over the way from Goshen, and it's dark over there. We living in light over here. Why is it so dark? It's usually lit up over there, but it's so dark. And it was dark for a long time because when you think about it, they had darkness that was just as darkness, but they had darkness from the flies and the locusts and all these other things too.
Covering up the sun.
So you had all of these things that was going on over there, and you know there wasn't no news channel to look to. There wasn't no town crier that was going around talking about the sky is falling. The sky is falling.
Internet to tell you what's happening.
Yeah, they didn't have none of that. Right? And so potentially there was people who didn't really know exactly what was going on. But over here, you know, what they did know was that it was necessary for them to go and these specific instructions, right? Go and get a lamb, not just any lamb, right? A young lamb, a perfect lamb.
On a certain day.
Right? Without spot or blemish. Yeah, on a particular day, get it. And don't get like the biggest one you can find. Get one that's just perfect for your family. Right? Where you won't have any leftovers. And if you think it's going to be too much for your family, get like some of your neighbors who got a small family. They could come and have it with y'all. Right? There's specific instructions that's given to make the distinction. So when you think about it, it's not all the way like a simple thing. It's not just a simple little basic thing. Like all you gotta do is just do this.
Go get a lamb.
Just go get a lamb, whatever. Just whatever kind you want. It's like specific instructions for your salvation. Right? There's things involved that you got to do, and you got to do them like thus and so that you can get the desired results. And so again, when we think about this for our purposes in terms of, you know, how we do these things in this day and time, you know, we got to think about the fact that when we look back and see that, especially when we look at Passover now, where Passover really is the perfect picture of our initial choosing and salvation. When we look at the fact, it's not just a coincidence that Yeshua died at Passover time. It's not just a coincidence that when he died, he was showing his disciples the spiritual significance of Passover. right? We have to be able to look at this and understand that this is something that is of great significance, and we are able to gain a great understanding as to what it is the Most High has done and is doing in the lives of his people when we look at this thing with Passover over here. So we want to look at this. It's interesting, when you think about, how it is that people think about Passover and these times, and Exodus chapter 12. For me, thinking about, how people think about Passover and when to keep it, and the days and all of this, how to do it. You know, I always have to look at the Torah and what the Torah says in relation to the Passover to be able to understand when it is or what it is that it's saying, right? And so when I want to be able to determine how or when I do a thing, I have to be able to look to the scriptures, the Torah specifically, the law, statutes, and commands, to be able to do that. And so from a principle standpoint, if I want to know how to do something, or if I should be doing something to begin with, I got to go to the Torah in order to see that. And the Torah got to be my foundation for doing it. So when we look, many people don't know because they don't have any, they don't have a foundation in these things where they found out about being Israel and then just started doing the things and there's no connection to the history of things and the way in which people did things. But when we look at the history of people doing these feast days, there's people who don't have it figured out in terms of when to do these days, in terms of when to do it. Do I do it on the beginning of the 14th? Do I do it at the end of the 14th? Is the 13th involved in the situation? The 15th is the day. Well, when do I do the things? But when you look over here, we're able to see from a Torah perspective exactly what to do. It's spelled out for us step by step, and we just looked at it. And so when we look over here, let's just look at this, right? When we look over here, looking at verse 3. When we look at verse 3, it says, let's see here, scroll down. This is easy, right? On the 10th day of the month, you take a lamb, right? So we know right there, on the 10th day, we're supposed to go out and find us a lamb. We're not going to do this at nighttime. We're going to do it at daytime. That's when we could go out and see. It's going to be easy for us to find it because it's going to be daytime. We can look at it. We can inspect it because we have to inspect it, right? We have to determine whether this lamb is appropriate for our household because that's part of our situation according to the house of his father, right? We got to know, we got to be able to inspect this thing and see if it's too small. Is the thing too small? Right? Or is it too big? You do all of this stuff, right? You take the lamb, that perfect one. And if we scroll down, right, we say on verse 6, and you shall keep it until the 14th day on the same new moon or of the same month. So you took it on the 10th, and then you keep it until. So we want to look at
why he was so specific to say of the same month, basically, of the same. Like he could have just said on the 14th day.
Yeah. So, but that would have been non-specific, but he's giving us specific instructions. Right. And so I've seen people play with this word right here. Until people don't play with this word. Right. So when we look, I don't want to play with any words. I want to just look at the thing, right? And so when we think about this, right, it says so first of all, let's think about some things, right? We already said the lamb's not going to be found. You're not looking for the lamb at nighttime. So we're not talking about the 9th at even. We're not talking about the 9th at even because that's nighttime. So we're not talking about going into the 9th day. We're talking about the day part of here. Let's say this too, because something that we have to be able to understand when we're thinking about these things is that a day actually has 4 parts to it. A calendar day. Let's say that a calendar day has 4 parts to it. There's 4 parts. There's the Erev, which is the mixture of darkness and light, where light is going away and darkness is overcoming. Erev, and then you have the night or the Lila, right? Where you have the night where that's only darkness, right? So you have Erev and Lila, you have even and night, right? And then you have Boker, right? Where you have another mixture. Boker and Erev look the same. You know that they're different because one is night growing and the other one is day growing. So Boker, the light is coming, right? And then you have when light has all the way come, you have day. So when we think about a day, there's 4 components to it. And so when we talk about the idea of finding this lamb on the 10th day, we can eliminate Erev and Lila from the situation where now we only have the day part to think about, because we're not going to be going out and searching, investigating all of this stuff during the night part, right? We're going to do that in the day part. And Boker, like, we're just waking up. We getting up. We getting ready. You know, we're getting our situation together. We're wiping the coals out of our eyes and all of that. So we only have the day part to do those things. All right. So you keep it, and then you keep it all the way. And then where it tells you specifically, it says you shall keep it until the 14th day and kill it in the evening. And so it knows that inspiration knows that there's 4 parts to a calendar day. And so it didn't want you to have to try to figure out what part it wanted you to kill it. So it tells you specifically. It says until. the 14th, and you're killing it at the even. So, in order to keep it until the 14th and then kill it, it would have to be, let's see here. When we, so it would have to be the 14th at even. So it couldn't be, I'm saying that the people who do Passover and include the 13th in any way, is it can't be according to the Torah, because we're saying that it's the 14th at even, which would be going into the next day, which would be the 15th day. And so for somebody to try to make the case about the beginning of the 14th, which would be the 13th at even.
You would kill the lamb on the 13th for it to be ready on the 14th.
Right. But the Torah don't make no mention of the 13. It don't say 13 at all. Only 14. And so we can actually take 13 and move it to the side and never think about it again, because if it's saying the 14th day at even, that's putting us at the end part of the day. But as we go forward, we can continue to understand that this, what it's talking about, is actually the end part of the day. But I wanted to look at, again, we look at this word until, because, you know, people do kind of play games with this word over here. Verse 6, let's see here. Until 5704, which is odd, which says, let's see, it's used as a preposition, adverb, or conjunction, especially with a preposition, as far or long or much as, whether of space is translated as even, unto, during, while, until. See, even when we look at this, right, if it's used to mean during, while, or until, like if I said I'm going to sit here until 5 o'clock, that kind of means when it becomes 5 o'clock, I'm going to not sit here anymore. Like, until is the cutoff point. But it also means during or while. This word odd, right? And so it has these various types of situations where it can be something that signifies an end to something, or it could also mean something that is inclusive of the thing, all at the same time.
Until 5 o'clock don't mean you're going to get up at exactly 5 o'clock.
It don't necessarily mean that. It could mean that that's the time that I'm going to maybe think about getting up. Maybe I'm going to get straight up, or maybe I won't get up before that, but I could get up after that, but I don't got to get up right at that time. I'm saying that when we think about this word over here in the Hebrew, it's not something that's just cut and dry, just black or white.
On or off.
Yeah, it's not about on or off, right? There seems to be kind of a inclusive aspect to it that we have to be able to consider when we think about this. And so when we look at this from a standpoint of the Hebrew, there's a vast range of definition that can be put into this little 2-letter word over here. And so when it says, and you shall keep it up until the 14th day, and the whole congregation of Israel shall kill it in the evening, we have to be able to understand what it is that that's talking about. But it helps us, right? Because we see that word odd used again a few verses down, where it helps us to see the inclusivity of it. If we look at read verse 10 for us.
10.
Hold on, let me pull it down. Right there.
And do not
Hold on, read 9 and 10.
All right. Exodus 12:9.
Do not eat it raw, nor boiled at all with water, but roasted in fire, its head with its legs and its inward parts. And do not leave of it until morning, and what remains of it until morning you are to burn with fire.
Okay, now wait a second. It said, do not leave of it until morning. Some verses might say, you shall let nothing of it remain until morning. So in other words, don't let none be there when morning comes. Right? It says, don't let there be anything that's left over until morning. But then the next part says that what does remain of it until morning, burn it. So am I supposed to have it all gone before morning gets there? Or when morning gets there, should I just burn it? But I can't have anything in the morning if I ate it all up before morning even got there. So we're able to see by its usage in this context that is something that's inclusive, where the point is it don't want you to keep it. You use all that you're going to use and burn the rest up. But the morning, it says, if there of what remains of it until morning, burn that. Morning is boker, yes. Right? And so I'm saying that we could look at this in the English and say, don't leave of it until morning, or don't let any of it remain till morning, would mean that I'm going to eat it all at night and I'm not going to let the leftovers see morning. But in the very same verse is telling you, if you have leftovers in the morning, you take those leftovers and you burn them. That was verse 10. Where do we read to? 13? Here, read 12. Read 12.
And I shall pass through the land of Mitzrayim on that night, and shall strike all the firstborn in the land of Mitzrayim, both man and beast, and on all the mighty ones of Mitzrayim I shall execute judgment.
Okay. Okay, so all of this stuff was happening. This stuff happened, he said, pass through at night. This stuff is happening at night, where it's dark, at night, right? Right there. That's at night. And so you have instructions for what you would do in the daytime part, in the evening part, in the night part. It's going to be happening. The things is going down at the nighttime part. And then we also seen what we was going to do in the morning part, where so far was just burning what you had left over from the night before, if you did have anything left over. But what we do see here is important part is that you have your loins girded, your sandals on your feet, your staff in your hand, and you eating with haste. And so you're ready. You're not you're not waiting for there's not time in between. This is all consecutive. These things go from one thing to the next. So you take the lamb, you burn it between the evenings, which when you think about what that's talking about, I need my eraser. When you think about what that's talking about, where it says when you should kill it between the two evens, if we was to think about the cycle of the sun, let me make a little. I'll make a little picture, and then I'll share it over here with you. We know from a historical standpoint that when the time that the lamb was slain was between the height of the sun and is going down. So in here, throughout the day, in here was when you killed it, right? You killed the lamb in this portion of the day. So between the height of the sun and the setting of the sun was a time where you killed it and you got it all ready, and then you got ready to eat it, but you had to have it killed and the blood on the doorpost and all that before night, because at nighttime the death angel was coming, right? So you had to do all of that stuff. You had to do all of that stuff before eventime came. So again, we're talking about the 14th day. It's daytime and the sun's going down. You killing it, you preparing it, you doing all you doing so that you ready to eat it and have the blood put on the doorpost before the sun gets down here at nighttime. Because when it's nighttime, you don't know when that death angel's coming. So you got to have all that stuff done. And then when you think about the other part, the morning, right? When you think about the other part, you got that. Here, let me try to. You got the sun going, all the way around, and you got to be with your shoes on your feet and your staff in your hand, and the food been done ate already. And if you got any left over, you're gonna burn it over at morning, because when the sun come all the way up, it's time to go. It's time to go. We didn't read that part. We're gonna read that.
Get the women out.
But you have this time here to prepare it and cook it and have everything ready, because in this night part, the death angel's coming. And then in the morning part, the only thing you got to do in the morning is burn leftovers if you have any, so that you could be out. But you have this kind of a quick time, turnover time for you to go ahead and do that. And another thing that we have to think about here, let's see. Let's read some more so we could talk about all of this here. Let's read we read down to 13. Let's pick back up on 14. Start reading at 14 there.
And this day shall become to you a remembrance, and you shall celebrate it as a festival to Yahweh throughout your generations. Celebrate it as a festival and everlasting law. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. Indeed, on the first day you cause leaven to cease from your houses. For whoever eats leavened bread from the first day until the seventh day, that shall be cut off from Israel. And on the first day it is a set apart gathering, and on the seventh day you have done a set apart gathering. No work at all is done on them. Only that which is eaten by every being, that alone is prepared by you. And you shall guard the festival of Matzot. For on the same day I brought your divisions out of the land of Mitzrayim, and you shall guard this day throughout your generations, an everlasting law.
All right, stop right there. And so now we have mention of this 7-day period. The 7-day period that you were supposed to be eating unleavened bread. And so again, if we think about the idea of 7 days of eating unleavened bread, and we eat our unleavened bread with our lamb that we killed on the 14th day at even. If we think about again the 7-day period, we can't be adding 13 to this 7-day period, because the first day is the 15th and the last day is the 21st day. If we done added 13 to the mix, we got way more than 7-day period. So we got to exclude 13 out of the mix.
Because you have to get the 11 out on the 13th in order to be ready for the 14th. At least
well, you would be eating your unleavened bread on the 13th with your lamb that you killed, or on the 14th even. You would be eating it in this other day, like it's too many days. If you only got a 7-day period where you're supposed to eat the unleavened bread. And so again, when we think about this whole idea of when you're doing these things at even, like the new day is starting when it's Erev. And so if we was to say that this is the 14th at even at Erev, and this is the beginning of the new day over here, so we're leaving 14 behind, and the 15th really is the day. And he said over here in verse that we read over here, verse 15. Wait, let's hold on. Let me get my cursor straight over here. In verse 14, he said, and this day shall become to you a remembrance. The day that he's talking about is the 15th day of Abib. That's the day that he's talking about. And this day shall become to you a remembrance, and you shall celebrate it as a festival throughout your generation. Celebrate as a festival, as an everlasting law. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. He's talking about the first day, the 15th day, and the 7th day, which is the 21st day of the month. If we add 14 to that, that's 8 days. This is rudimentary right here. This is very simple things right here. If we count 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, that's 7 days. If we add 14 to that, that's 8. or 7.5. But he said 7 days. So we can only count from 15 to 21. That's 7 days. So we have to get to the place of understanding, again, looking at this from a Torah perspective. The Passover it's not a whole day. It's a moment in time. It's a portion of a day that's in preparation for the Memorial Day, which is the 15th of Abib. It's prep day, right? In the week is Friday, right? Getting us ready for the thing that's the most important part is the Exodus. Let's get out of here.
The Exodus isn't delayed by a whole day from Passover.
No, we got to forget about 13, right? Because they were ready with their staffs in their hand and their shoes on their feet, and they hurried up and ate.
Because they left out of there.
Yeah.
Like,
well, yeah.
And then the sun didn't go back around and set.
Yeah.
And then the 15th happened.
If I add 13 to the situation, you know, if I'm with haste now, it says eat with haste. So it take a long time to kill the thing and to kill it and to cook it. Yeah, and you talking about a whole lamb you cooking. That thing took hours to cook. So they sat up here and killed it in here, and they had to have it ready because at midnight, the death angel was coming. And so they had to have all of that stuff done with the blood on the doorpost, eat the food, and you ready to go.
Next day.
By the time the daytime comes, you're out of here. But we're saying that if this is 14th at even, but if this is 13th at even going down, you got a whole day you could chill, you could relax. You don't got to worry about
the bread rise. You don't have to worry about that.
You can take your time because you got a whole day in between.
Yep. And then you leave on the 15th.
Yeah, and then and so 15th is always the day. That's the day. So if I say 13th at even, now I got this whole day. What do I got to be in haste for? I can take my time, right? But that's not it. It's a rush to get done. I got to hurry up and get this food done. I got to get this blood up on the doorpost, and I got to have my shoes ready because whenever that sun hit, I got to go. And then I got to burn that food that if I got any left over, I got to burn it. I got one thing to do when the day break. Burn the food. Daybreak, I'm out of here. And so again, it's giving you this timeline and it's showing you what to do starting from the 14th at even. Entering into that first day of unleavened bread and what you need to be doing. And then it gives you what's happening all at night and in the morning, and then go time. And so when we look over here, it spells it out for you. And then again, we look at it from looking at verse 14 and 15, where it enters in this idea of this 7 days, where it's telling you, you know, you read down to, here, read 18.
In the first month, on the 14th day of the new moon, in the evening you shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the new moon in the evening.
Okay, let's stop right there. So if we say that you're supposed to eat unleavened bread for 7 days, And it's telling you right there, in the first month, on the 14th day of the new moon, in the evening, you shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the new moon in the evening. How many days is that? Well, it tells you right here, 7 days, right? But we already know if we include 14 in our count, that's not 7 days, it's 8 or 7.5. But it don't say 7.5 days. So it helps us to understand a few things over here. One thing that it helps us to understand, it helps us to understand when a day begins, a calendar day. At even, it tells you right there. In the first month on the 14th day of the new moon in even. That's the beginning right there. That's the mixture of the day that it is going into the day that it's about to be. But it helps us to understand that we only dealing with 7 days because it tells you right here. Right? 14th day at even. Eat unleavened bread until the 21st day, the new moon in the evening. From even to even. 7 days. And so again, we're getting this thing that's giving us a historical record of what's happening, but it also is giving us the Torah. It's giving us the laws. It's showing us, how we're supposed to think about things, how we're supposed to do things. It's teaching us about the calendar over here. It's helping us to understand that when we think about Feast of Unleavened Bread, that the thing that the most important aspect of that is that first day of unleavened bread. The Passover is just a sacrifice that we're making for the festival that is a memorial forever. We don't got two festivals, not the Passover festival and the Feast of Unleavened Bread festival.
That's the beginning of
the
Feast of Unleavened Bread.
Right. And so the scriptures teaching us this, as is given it to us. Here, keep on reading. Let's see. You read from 19 there.
All right. For 7 days, no leaven is to be found in the girl house. For if anyone eats what is leavened, that same being shall be cut off from the congregation of Israel, whether sojourner or native of the land. Do not eat that which is leavened in all your dwellings. You are to eat unleavened bread. And Moshe called for all the elders of Israel and said to them, go out and take lambs for yourselves according to your clans and slay the Pesach. And you shall take a bunch of the hyssop and dip it in the blood that is in the basin and strike the lintel and the 2 doorposts with the blood that is in the basin. And none of you shall go out of the door of his house until morning.
Okay, stop right there. So now again, we're seeing the idea of the haste that's taking place, and we're removing this idea of any parts of the 13th day, because over here you take this lamb, you take this lamb, you kill it, and then you shut in. You're shut in. Don't go nowhere. Don't go out of the door until morning. Right? Because morning you was going to go out here and burn this lamb if you got any leftovers. Okay, keep on going.
And Yahweh shall pass on to smite the Mitzrites, and shall see the blood on the lintel and on the 2 doorposts. And Yahweh shall pass over the door and not allow the destroyer to come into your house to smite you. And you shall guard this word as a law for you and your sons forever. And it shall be when you come to the land which Yahweh gives you, as he promised, that you shall guard this service. And it shall be when your children say to you, what does this service mean to you? Then you shall say, it is the Pesach, slaughtering of Yahweh, who passed over the houses of the children of Israel in Mitzrayim when he smote the Mitzrites and delivered our households. And the people bowed their heads and did obeisance. And the children of Israel went away and did so. And Yahweh had commanded Moshe and Aaron, so they did.
Okay, so there we have this breakdown, this giving of the instructions, this telling of what was to be done with the Passover, right? With Feast of Unleavened Bread. So it tells you what to do, and then the next part, it tells you what happened. But first, it tells you what it is that you're supposed to do when you're supposed to do it. And so when we look at the Torah, is very cut and dry as to how to do it. When we think about the various arguments that people make in terms of when or why to do this or that, you cannot get from the Torah anything other than having your Passover Seder meal at the 14th at even. When you look at even being the going into the 15th, it can't be no other way based on what the Torah gives us. If you want to look to some other Bible references, you can do that. But from Torah, it don't give you that. When we look to see what Yeshua did, we have to be able to understand the spiritual significance of Yeshua and who he is. If Yeshua is the Passover lamb, which he is, then he is killed at the time when the Passover lamb was killed, which is on the 14th at even. And so he couldn't both be the Passover lamb and also then eat it when he was supposed to eat it, because he's the Passover lamb. So he did it. So Yeshua did the Passover early, so that whenever he goes and is killed for the redemption of Israel, he is killed at the time when the Passover lamb was killed. And so he had to sit up here and explain all of this to his disciples, and he did it a day early. And so if you want to say, as people do, they're doing Yeshua's memorial, okay, yeah, I'll give you that. All right. But we can't look back in Torah and say that the Torah instructs for us to do the Passover that day early, because it doesn't.
And we know a group that does Yeshua Memorial, and then they do Passover. We knew two groups that do it that way.
Yeah,
Yeshua Memorial when he did it, and then they do Passover the next night.
Yeah, they covering all the bases over here.
Now, one of the things that when we've done the research on it, that we saw was that the Romans would execute Israelites when the people was going up to the temple to make their Passover sacrifices, so they wouldn't have an insurrection.
Mm-hmm.
All the people are coming together for the pilgrimage feast, so the Romans crucified, Israelites, had them hanging.
Yeah.
So the people would see that and then kind of be demoralized or whatever, so they wouldn't rise up against the Romans.
Wicked people. Yeah. So there's all types of historical record to look and see if we want to look at these things. But my thing is that we have to be able to look at what the Torah, first of all, what the Torah instructs for us to do, and then second of all, understand what it is that Yeshua did for us, which he didn't come to destroy the law. He didn't come to make a new law. He came to fulfill the law that was already in place. And so there's a perfect connection between what he did and what we just got finished looking at over here. And, those two things, have to be kept in their proper places. And so when we understand what it is that Yeshua did in the context, he's giving a having a teaching moment with his disciples, showing them what he is about to do for mankind with his sacrifice, with his redemptive work that he's about to do, with shedding of his blood, being the Lamb of Elohim. And just like we see what the Most High did with Israel in Egypt, in terms of taking Israel out of Egypt and making that distinction between Egypt and Israel by the blood of the Lamb, that same distinction is made with us from Mitzrayim by the blood of the Lamb of Elohim, who is Yeshua. And he's working these things in the same timeline that he worked those things originally, because he's just fulfilling the things that he initiated from the Torah. And so it makes so much sense for us to be able to look and see that Yeshua was indeed the Passover lamb. He was killed at the very same time that they was over there in the temple killing Passover lambs and getting ready to go and eat Passover meals. At the same time, he's up there dying for our freedom. He's over there fulfilling what we see over here in Exodus from a spiritual perspective, making a mockery of death because he about to raise up from the dead. And so, we have to be able to understand the scriptures from a spiritual perspective and put that against what it gives us from this literal perspective. We see what was done in Egypt with the original Passover and the instructions that's given. And then in the same manner, we see what Yeshua has done for us in terms of being our Passover lamb and the necessity for us to have that sacrifice applied to our situation and to gobble up that that sacrifice, to eat it up, to take in that sacrifice, right? To make that sacrifice become part of our blood and our DNA and our makeup and our soul, ingest it, right? Make it a personal thing for us, just like they did originally. they're giving us this picture of taking this lamb, and every person who was an Israelite or connected to Israel, took part in this situation, which helps us to understand that lest we take part in this, in Yeshua, lest we ingest Yeshua into us, then we can't be part of the people.
We'll get cut off.
That's what
we won't be part of it.
you won't be part of it. You won't be part of it. You right. Forever. Right. So we see
make it into being part of it.
We see the same thing. We see first of all, if you don't got the blood, the death angel is not going to pass over you. First of all, the destroyer only knows to skip over your house because he sees the blood. But beyond that, we see that this thing is a commandment forever, and all those people that's connected to Israel have to take part in this thing the way that it is prescribed. Okay, so let's see over here. How far did we say we was gonna go with this? I actually want to read down to. I actually want to keep on going. Pick up at. Where do we read down to? Read 29 right there.
And it came to be at midnight that Yahweh struck all the firstborn in the land of Mitzrayim, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sat on his throne to the firstborn of the captive who was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of livestock. And Pharaoh rose up in the night, he and all his servants and all the Mitzrites. And there was a great cry in Mitzrayim, for there was not a house where there was not a dead one. Then he called for Moshe and Aaron by night and said, "Arise, go out from the midst of my people, both you and the children of Israel, and go, serve Yahweh as you have said. Take both your flocks and your herds, as you have said, and go, then you shall bless me too."
Okay, so we see over here that at midnight, it says at midnight, verse 29, Yahweh struck all the firstborn. Right? So again, we think about this whole situation over here, right? Midnight, if we was to think about it, in the middle of the night, it's dark. It's dark out, and it been dark. So they had time. They had time to eat and do all the things of festivities that they was going to do. I guess at this time it's not really festivities. It's just having yourself ready to go to be sure that that lamb, that you started cooking over here is done, and you had plenty of time to eat it and do all that you had to do, because over here you had to be in your house, because that's when that death angel was coming, and you had to have put your blood on the doorpost and been ready, because at midnight, in the middle of the night, he's coming. And just like he said was going to be, it was a great cry in the land. And it wasn't a house, it said, that didn't have death in it. And so that's just to say, there was no way of escaping that death angel if you didn't have that blood.
He was gonna hide.
There wasn't no hiding. There wasn't nobody that got away. And so the same thing is true when we think about the fact that, Yeshua being the Lamb of Elohim. There's no way to escape that death angel if you didn't never apply his blood to your doorposts and your lintels. Right? If the entrance to your heart has not been covered by the blood of Yeshua, then there's no way for you to escape death. The wages of sin is death. And if then you didn't never take care of your sins by applying the blood of Messiah to your soul, then that death angel is coming at midnight and you're going to be dead. And there's going to be great crying as a result of that. And so, we have to be able to understand that we have this historical record not for history's sake, but to help us to understand a spiritual truth that is going to save our very souls. And that is that the Most High has given us great instructions, and he has taken great care to provide a way for us to be safe from his wrath. And that way is Yeshua, who is the Lamb of Elohim. And, we see when we look at these plagues, we see the Most High proving himself and helping for both Israel and for Egypt to be able to understand and know who he is and get to the place of knowing that he is, the Most High is great, and there is none that is like unto him. And he sits up here and he brings all of the gods of Egypt to ruin. And again, in the eyes of both Egypt and Israel, letting everyone see that the Most High, Yahweh, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, is Elohim over everything. And he just proved it right over there, right? And so when we look at this, it is helpful for us to be able to look back and look and see what it is that that Yeshua has done for us, and the way in which that he did it. Right? He's done it and manifested the fulfillment of the original Passover. Okay. What's this person over here talking about? Oh, when Messiah says drink his blood and eat his flesh, is that demonic or fulfillment of the Old Testament? Well, again, when we think about the scriptures and what it is that Yeshua is doing and him fulfilling the scriptures, many people looked at that. And they wasn't trying to be disciples no more because they wasn't able to understand spiritual things. Right? When we think about spiritual things from a place of carnality, it's impossible for us to be able to perceive it. But when we think about things from a spiritual perspective, it's actually the only way that we're able to perceive it. So when we think about the idea of ingesting Yeshua from a spiritual perspective, that's what he wants for us to do. He wants for us to have his life juices inside of us, right? His flesh, his blood, to be part of us, right? That's why we talk about the idea of that unleavened bread being his body and us eating it, with him being that spiritual food from above and us eating it. Are we talking about drinking blood though? That's what we're talking about. We're looking at this from a spiritual perspective and thinking about the spiritual significance that's connected with all of this. Again, when we think about these things from a spiritual perspective, it's the only way that we're able to be able to understand it, right?
He was talking high frequency.
Yeah. And
That's why they can understand.
they did. All kinds of disciples left at that point.
They can understand.
Except for the true ones, they stayed behind. They didn't understand it, but they knew. Use it up or saying it. I gotta just trust that is not something that's demonic. Because if I think about it just from just a basic level, the scripture tells us don't eat blood, right? It tells us don't eat blood. So how is Yeshua sitting up here talking about drink by blood? That ain't what he's talking about. He's talking about you take my life into you. You let your life be a life that's me in you manifest, because the life is in the blood, right? But you are what you eat, right? He got high frequency on him, and the people wasn't there. And so again, we have to be able to understand that, and know that the scriptures, the law is spiritual and it's good, right? And so we see these things that literally happen, but if we're not able to see them from a spiritual perspective, we're not going to be able to understand what's going on with the scriptures, right? Okay, so when we look at this thing that's going on with the Exodus and with the fact that the Most High comes in here and flexes his muscles all over Egypt and Pharaoh, and is the force and the power upon which Israel is removed from Egypt, we have to be able to look at this and understand that the same thing is true for us. The Most High, Yeshua in us, is the strength and power and force upon which we're able to be freed from the clutches of death, right? He gives us the strength, power, and ability to be able to overcome our carnal mind and walk in the newness of life, right? He gives us that strength. And just like he told Israel to have the women go and to take and to request for the goods of Mizraim, the same way he goes to us and has for us through his power, make requests and demands on our flesh and our carnal mind to say, you are not my master anymore. I need for you to hand over all the things that belong to the Most High, and I'm going to let my master now be the controller of those things because of the things that he did, right? And that's the most important part to be able to grasp over here, is knowing that the success, the power that we have in Yeshua is the thing that gets us through, not our own power and our own strength and our own might, but the power of the Ruach HaKodesh in us. We going off the strength of the Most High, not our own strength, right?
And that even gives more weight to us casting out spirits, even demonic spirits in Yeshua. Just the whole thing of demanding payment.
Right.
Demanding reparation.
Right. Because again, when we look at what was going on, it wasn't about the men going and strong arming the enemy. It was just about them showing up on the strength of the Most High and his power, and them just having faith in his power and saying, just give me what's mine. And so, we have to get to the place where we're looking at the adversary, when we're looking at these things that's coming against us, when we're looking at these things that's holding us back, and we're looking at these things and holding us down, and we just speaking to these things and saying, excuse me, but you don't have any power over here. You just give me those things that the Most High, you trying to hold stuff back from me. You give me those things that the Most High wants for me to have, so I can go over here and I can worship him with the things that you trying to hold me back from. Because that's what they did, right? They took the silver and the gold from Egypt, the things that Egypt was trying to hold back from them. They took those things and they went and they made the tabernacle. They made all of the things that was necessary for worship they got from Egypt. But in all actuality, that was the things that Egypt was trying to hold back from them, where they said again, off the strength of the Most High, you give me what belongs to me. Thus says the Most High, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Let me see. Let me just say this right here. Let me just say this right here. I'm gonna end on this note. Let's see here. When we think about, I want to go over to, I'm gonna end on this note. 1 Corinthians chapter 2. Because it's most important. It's most important for us to be able to understand that, again, this is a spiritual book, right? The scriptures is a spiritual book, and I started off by saying that the Torah is giving us this historical account, but also within the historical account is giving us the character of the Most High. And one of the last things that Yeshua did for his disciples was show himself to the disciples in the Torah and the prophets and the historical writings. And so we know, if we literally read the Torah, it don't say Yeshua unless it's talking about the successor of Moses. So how in the world was Yeshua showing his disciple himself if it didn't ever talk about Yeshua literally in the Torah? Well, you have to be able to look at these things from a spiritual perspective, right? And so if we look at 1 Corinthians over here, 1 Corinthians chapter, chapter 2. I'm gonna read this right here. chapter 2, verse 10 says, "But Elohim has revealed them to us through his spirit. For the spirit searches all matters, even the depths of Elohim. For who among men knows the thoughts of a man except the spirit of the man that is in him? So also the thoughts of Elohim no one has known except the spirit of Elohim. And we have received not the spirit of the world, but the spirit that is from Elohim, in order to know what Elohim has favorably given us, which we also speak not in words which man's wisdom teaches, but which the set apart spirit teaches, comparing spiritual matters with spiritual matters." Verse 14, "But the natural man does not receive the matters of the spirit of Elohim, for they are foolishness to him. The natural man does not receive the matters of the spirit of Elohim, for they are foolishness to him, and he is unable to know them because they are spiritually discerned. But he who is spiritual discerns indeed all matters, but he himself is discerned by no one." If we aren't able to look at the scriptures and understand them from a spiritual perspective, we just have to understand that we dealing with these things from a carnal, from our carnal mind. When we remove ourselves from our carnal mind, which a carnal mind, those that are carnally minded, to be carnally minded is death, but to be spiritually minded is life and peace. We have to understand that these scriptures over here is about the spirit. And you cannot understand the scriptures from a spiritual perspective, right? And so when you think about these scriptures over here and understanding them the way that they're meant to be understood, you can't do that from a carnal mind, because you're not going you going to look at the scriptures and think just like the disciples thought that Yeshua was talking about cannibalism when he said, "Eat my body and drink my blood." But we know what he was talking about over there. He wasn't talking about cannibalism, because that would be something that's against the Torah, and he wasn't against the Torah. He was for it. Right. And he don't cause us to sin. He removes sin from our life. So when we understand from a spiritual perspective that what he wanted for us to do was to have his character, mind, spirit, consciousness be infused in our bodies, like unto what happens when we eat food. That's what he wanted for us to see. But if you're not thinking about it from a spiritual perspective, you can't see that, right? And so again, today we dealing with what happened to Egypt over here with this last plague. We'll finish up with the last part of this chapter on next week. We got a good start as far as looking at this thing and understanding, what it is that the Most High did for us, his people in Egypt, and then also thinking about, how he does the same thing for us now, even today, when we're able to apply the blood of Yeshua to our hearts and minds and allow him to be the sole controller of our lives and take us away from this wicked taskmaster that wants to have control of us, our carnal mind, our flesh, and our desires that want to sit up here and rule and reign over top of us. We trust in the Most High, and we ask for a new ruler, a new master that's able to move us into righteousness and out of this life of darkness and move us into a life of life in his light. Okay, so that being said, um, we're going to go ahead and be done for now. Y'all willing, we will be back on next week and talk about more wonderful things in the scriptures. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, share the channel with your friends so more people could get on to the situation over here. And we'll say for now, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
How much?